All right, everybody ready? Yes, sir. Doors last. Hartford. 528, departing runway 9er. Staying closed left traffic, Hartford. All right, full throttle. Here we go. I got the legendary Alan Kogan from the Kogan Conversation.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this, so I got back to it about 4.5 years ago after putting it down for about 12 years. And I went to school originally to be in aviation, and then it just did not work out. So it was one of those things where they always say in aviation, the two things that'll take you out of aviation is time and money, and I had neither. And then I didn't have any time, and then I didn't have any money, and then I didn't have any time again, and then so it just it was a forever process.
Sure.
All right, well, we just had a fantastic plane ride with Brad. I appreciate that awesome trip, man. That's incredible.
Yeah, man, we just did a little loop around Hartford, Wisconsin, and even gave Alan the controls. So we ended up we were alive. So that was good. I think the closest thing we ran into was a cloud. So
yeah. Almost hit it. But no, so I know we talked about doing this, and you said, hey, come on, let's record in the hangar. I'll give you a flight, and that was an amazing offer. I'm like, I can't refuse that, and plus we get to share some bourbon now. So it's crazy that I met you at a wedding, one of my oldest friends. Alex's wedding, and we talked about bourbon there. We talked about some stuff that you did, and then it just kind of transpired into this, and now here we are. So, welcome.
Yeah, it was awesome. I was trying to find a fun place to hang out at that wedding. You know, typically as a wedding officiant, you aren't used to staying much past cocktail hour, and so it's kind of like one of those things. Like I don't even know what to do after dinner, and I'm like, do I talk to people? Like. And then I saw you hanging out, and I'm like, he seems like a fun guy. So like I went and started talking to him. Of course, then we had it was you, me, and some other guy, and we were just like, it was jokes all night.
Yeah.
It was great. I don't think I've laughed that hard in a while. So
I think I was the one guy out there with a neat whiskey and a cigar, looking like a 75-year-old man.
By yourself.
Yeah, I got to talk to that guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing I always ask my guests is just give me an introduction, an abridged version of who is Brad Schnell.
Yeah, sure. So who is Brad Schnell? I guess I'm an aspiring IT professional. I always say that because I am a guy that loves to do a lot of different stuff. And so to me, I started in, like we were talked about it, I studied to become a pilot at first, and then just life and circumstances kind of took me out of the cockpit and kind of put me in a different place. And as someone who didn't finish school and then trying to get back on the kind of back on the professional game. I sold mortgages over the phone for a while. And then after 2007, decided I needed to do something different with my life. And then went and sold insurance for Northwestern Mutual for a while. And after that was over, I decided that I wanted to kind of go off and not be self-employed anymore. So I hit up a friend of mine who works for another company, and I started in sales there, and then transitioned to IT. And then all the while, I was, as we talked about, I was building this officiant business on the side. And, I'd been an entrepreneur before, and then just trying to learn how to build this practice. And then, so it's crazy because I do all this business stuff. I'm also, self-employed, employed, but I'm also the father of twin 8-year-old kids, and also love to fly airplanes. So I got a lot going on, man.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's a lot more than I knew, because I just knew you as the guy who's an officiant. And then you had told me at the wedding that you do this professionally, which I thought was awesome. How do you get into something like that, a professional officiating? Because I'm ordained, and I've officiated my sister-in-law and her now husband's wedding. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And they told me you should do this and just charge people for. I'm like, wow. So how do you get into it?
Completely by mistake, in the exact same way that you got into it. Really, is you have a friend that asked you to do it, and for me, it was about 2:30 in the morning, walking back from a bar in Wauwatosa, and I had really good friends of mine ask me to officiate their ceremony, and I agreed. And then the next morning, I was reminded that I did such a thing, and it started very simply in that my intention was I was going to do one wedding and be out, like that was it. Like I'd been asked to do it once, and that was going to be the way it was going to go. And so I at the time I was reading this book, and it was all about writing, and the title of it was Write What You Know. And I was like going back and forth about what I was going to make the ceremony about. And
sure.
Ultimately, I landed on, I really want to make it about their story together and kind of talk about their relationship and kind of how they came to be married that day. And that'll be fun. Everyone likes a love story. Otherwise, Hallmark would be out of business every December. And so I decided to make it about their story. And what was phenomenally surprising to me is when I sat down with them and started talking about their life together, I realized that these people that I'd known for a very long time, I absolutely knew nothing about.
Oh, wow.
And so I mentor a lot of would-be officiants as well. People reach out to me all the time and they're like, hey, I'm about to officiate my first ceremony. Like, what do I do?
Sure.
And my first thing is I always tell people, I'm like, you don't know your friends as well as you think you do. You might know their love story and the 30-second elevator pitch that they've given you for the last 5 years, but you don't really know their relationship on a deeper level, and start there.
Right.
And so I always work with couples to talk to them about kind of their story together first, and I always kind of make that sort of the essence of the ceremony.
Sure.
And so I did this one ceremony, and that was great. And other people in the audience were like, wow, that was pretty cool. We like that. We should hire him too.
Yeah.
And so I started working with a bunch of different couples, and one of them now owns a successful barn venue out in Delafield. And before they opened, they were like, hey, like, can you come out and perform our ceremony? It's like, yeah, absolutely. I'll do that. And after their ceremony was over, we got a chance to meet again, and we sat down, and they were like, hey, is this something you want to like do more of? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, do more of. And they were like, yeah, like, do you want to be a preferred vendor? And I was like, sure. I was kind of yes-manning my way through this whole practice, if you can't tell by now.
Of course.
But I was like, sure, I don't know what that means, but this will be fun. So they put me as a preferred vendor on their website, and it just was gangbusters. I mean, like, I think their first season open, I did 25 weddings at their venue.
Wow.
And then I was spread throughout on some other ones. So that was like the first really big year for me. And then 2015 was kind of the craziest time because I actually was #1 in Milwaukee Magazine in the wedding edition for officiating weddings. And I was like, I didn't know that was a thing that you could get an award for doing. Yeah. But there it was in print, and it was just kind of this crazy thing because as the years progressed, 2017 I won my first Wisconsin Bride Best of award for Best Officiant, and then I've been in the running for that award for the past like 6 years. So it's been wild.
That's cool. That's
so
cool.
Yeah. So it just kind of progressed naturally into this sort of crazy business that I never knew I wanted. And the way it started was really focusing on the people that were in front of me, and something that seemed very arbitrary ended up being something that was very important to the couples that I was working with. They're like, yeah, I've never been to a ceremony before where they talk about the story and really kind of bring everybody in. And so I think that's what made it special.
Sure. Well, I think with that, we should pour and have a cheers to love, because you've been a part of so many love stories.
Oh, man.
So let's pour some bourbon.
Sounds good. What are we starting with today?
So this one is, it's called Bear Creek Straight Bourbon. And I actually just discovered it at a bachelor party, because I'm in 17,000 weddings this year, in Denver, Colorado. And it's nothing fancy, but it's a great benchmark starting point bourbon. They've been around for, I think, just about 15 years or so. They age it at least 4 years. It's nothing special, like I said, but it's just a great benchmark bourbon to get us started. So,
great.
How about it?
Awesome. And you're in all these weddings not as an officiant, just so we're clear, just as a groomsman.
Yeah, actually, I'm standing up in every single one. Yeah. 4 weddings this year.
There you go.
Yeah. So it's matured in American white oak barrels as bourbon needs to be. I don't know if you're aware. So bourbon has to be in new fill American oak, 51% corn at least. There's proofing requirements for how it goes in the barrel, how it comes out, all that stuff. I just had this for the first time a month ago, so I'm curious what you think.
Awesome. Cheers.
Cheers, man.
To love.
To love.
I'm surprised by how it starts. It's very, very smooth. Most of the time in, kind of like a whiskey, I'm expecting kind of that upfront sort of, I think you call it, people can be offended by the kind of the upfront feeling of it. But to me, it goes really smooth, and it's kind of got a nice, persistent burn to it, whereas opposed to something that's got kind of an uppy downy sort of feel.
Sure.
I can definitely taste the oak in it for sure.
Yeah, it's very wooded. I get a lot of fruit notes on the nose, but then there's not really much sweetness there on the mouth, other than the traditional bourbon vanilla and baking spices. But I tried to research, I cut a couple notes down, but I tried to research what the mash bill was on this, and I couldn't find it. I'm assuming this is a high rye bourbon. All that spice, that kind of offensive, it almost feels like the alcohol is too burny.
Right.
Especially in the finish. That's all that rye spice, I'm pretty sure. But of course, they don't disclose their ingredient lists. So.
Wow, and it really dries out your mouth at the end.
It's almost like a Cabernet Sauvignon dryness in your mouth. It's wild.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's good. It's not bad, and it's won awards locally. I think this is a great entry because this is kind of what a lot of benchmark bourbons taste like to me.
Yeah.
It's very caramely, brown sugar forward, vanilla, and then it just dries out the mouth and goes away.
Yeah.
Nothing
and it
special.
sips really, really nice. So
yeah.
I
think this would be perfect in cocktail.
Yeah. Or on its own.
Or its own.
Because why would you do that?
But good bourbons and cocktails.
Yeah.
Being a part of so many weddings, I'm sure you've had some crazy stories, both good and bad.
Sure.
Give me just like two of your favorite, like maybe one great and one bad standout moment that you just tell everybody.
Sure. I think I'm gonna actually start with one of my favorite horror story weddings. It wasn't really a horror story. I say that in the best, but it's like you said, you see so many obnoxious things at weddings happening, and weddings themselves are sort of this mix of like this happy celebration, but there's also so much going on undertow wise.
Sure.
And as someone who stood up in weddings before, I'm sure you're aware of that. There's just all this drama that's happening underneath the surface. It's like, and I feel to me like weddings are really great when you can still have the calm sea, but amidst the churn underneath, right?
Right.
And for me, delivering a good ceremony, I get them through the door, right? What happens after that, that's up to them. But hey, if I can give them off with, making sure that there wasn't any drama in the ceremony, that's great. But and so far I haven't heard any drama that I've provided for a ceremony, so that's great as well.
So far. But commonly during these ceremonies, one of the things that couples will do to put a little bit of spin on their ceremonies, they'll do a unity ceremony at the end, right? And a unity ceremony to me is an officiant. When someone comes to me and says, hey, I'd like a unity ceremony, what they're looking for is they're looking to take two things that are probably really good on their own individually. But then when you combine them, they're supposed to either be better or they're supposed to mix together well. And so commonly you'll see one of my favorite ones is probably like the black and tan ceremony. Oh, sure.
Which you'll appreciate. So like black and tan, for those uninitiated on listening, is in Wisconsin and elsewhere. I'm sure they do it other places as well. But you can order a black and tan in a bar, and what that is that it's a Pilsner beer and Guinness together. Mm-hmm. And the Guinness will kind of float on top of the Pilsner because it's lighter weight than the Pilsner beer. So the Pilsner will kind of sink to the bottom. And so you got the black and you got the tan underneath. And so the couple that I was working with at the time that wanted to do this, the bride was an English teacher, and she just helped me craft this perfect thing. And she saw the black and tan as this duality of life, mixing dark and light and bitter and sweet together. It was awesome. And it's just kind of this really cool experience because after they're done mixing the black and tan in front of everybody, they drink it.
Right.
Why not? Right. And so they're going to have a drink right before their ceremony ends, which is just a great highlight on a good ceremony. I started with my positive, even though I was supposed to start with the negative, but what I'm going to is this unity ceremony that was a disaster, right? And I think we're beyond the statute of limitations. I think it happened 7 years ago, so I think we're good. I don't think they're going to come back for me on this, but if they do, it's fine. It's not my fault. It was your fault. But the thing is that we were setting up as this fall wedding. It was probably October, November. And they had a unity tree for their unity ceremony. And what that is that they're going to plant a tree. It's otherwise known as a sapling ceremony. They're going to plant a tree and put it somewhere special in their life together. And because like trees, love requires nurture and water and warmth and sunlight. And so we can draw all these parallels for this unity ceremony. And during my interview with the couple, they're like, yeah, we're going to get the tree from the bride's childhood home, and it's going to be a lilac bush. And I was like, oh, that's great. Good. From her childhood home. That's very sweet. And so now bring you back to the day of the ceremony, and they had this whole thing where they didn't want to open the doors for their ceremony until the ceremony was supposed to start. So everybody's staying outside in the cold, and it gets to be about a half an hour after the ceremony starts. 45 minutes. Doors are still locked. People are still standing outside, and it's like October in Wisconsin, so it's cold. It's not comfortable. We're used to it, but it's not comfortable.
Right.
And so they're standing out there, And this whole time I'm like, what is going on? And I don't have a lot of contact with the bride and the groom before the ceremony. Typically they're kind of off doing their own thing and I'm doing my own thing. And in the door walks this lady with this tree that, no kidding, looked like the Charlie Brown Christmas tree. Because it was just a mess. It was just disheveled, and it was like, it was a mess. The thing had like 2 leaves on it. And I go to the lady, I'm like, what is this? She's like, oh, this is the tree for the union ceremony. I'm like, come on. And she's like, no, it is. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, what took so long for it to get here? She's like, well, I had to go to the house where it was. And I'm like, well, it's the bride's childhood home. And she's like, well, her parents don't live there.
Oh God.
So this lady had stolen a tree and brought it to the ceremony. And I'm like, is this a crime? Am I to be arrested? Should I participate in this activity? And so they bring the tree in and we get to the end of the ceremony and man, that tree looked awful. Like it had been hacked to bits and like it's falling apart and they're adding soil to it. We went through the whole thing, but I highly doubt that tree is still alive.
Do you know what it was? What kind of tree was it?
It was a lilac tree.
Oh, it was lilac. Yeah, Jesus.
So, yeah, but no, it was one of those things where just the whole time I'm just trying to keep a straight face in the back as I'm reading through their union ceremony. They're pouring, dirt into this pot with this tree that just looks like it's gonna fall over.
I kind of have this like cinematic idea of them pouring the soil and doing the ceremony, and one of the last leaves just falls off.
Right.
It's like a perfect timing of the photo.
Yeah. I can't confirm or deny that actually happened, but let's just say that it did.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's right. Did they know that, or are they just playing along with it? Like, well, we're already here, might as well just embrace it.
I think a lot of couples, like you're in your ceremony, you have no way to stop it, right? Like, at that point, other than a bride being like, hey, we're not going to do that. Like, just skip that part, move on.
Sure.
Right, like the movie part where they're like, just skip to the I do's already, right? Like, we're in it. They're gonna go for it.
Sure.
So
when you do your ceremonies, do you draw any inspiration from anything? And have you like gone on YouTube or watched sermons or how do you go about fix? I'm sure you've learned a lot as you've done it. And public speaking has probably gotten better over the time. I mean,
yeah. One of the earliest things that I remember kind of wanting to be in public speaking and kind of aspiring to it later on in life was every Saturday afternoon, in my house, my dad would have on Garrison Keillor and Prairie Home Companion.
Oh, wow.
And so I, as someone who would listen to Prairie Home Companion every single weekend, one thing that really stuck with me was how to be a visual storyteller with words. And it's a very difficult thing to do. And it's something that I'm not saying I'm as good as Garrison Keillor, but I always try to aspire to be that.
Sure.
Just because like he could take you places and just sit next to the radio. And that was something that was really sort of foundational for me as a public speaker. It's something I always kind of put in the back of my head. And then as I was at Northwestern Mutual, one of the things that you do is you attend a lot of conferences. You see a lot of people speak about how they build their business and build their practice. And one of the things that I was listened to a lot, especially as I was starting out in the financial practice game, was I would listen to people's talks from years and years and years back. Our managing partner kept a library of all the speeches that had been given at the annual meetings and things like that, and that were sort of the hoorah to like get out there and sell insurance and investment products to people and kind of why it mattered. And so I would use that as kind of like the baseline. And for me, that's when I started writing my first ceremony. Those were the things that I feel like were really inspirational to me.
Sure.
Not only that, but the kind of I was talking about with the book, Write About What You Know. I've sort of in these different writing projects, and I've always tried to stay creative, and that was something that I wanted to stay on top of. And so that was really inspiring when I was doing my first ceremony.
I love that. Well, the ceremony that I witnessed you do was awesome. So, and of course I wouldn't be here if you were terrible. So
that's fair. Like, oh, that guy was terrible. I don't want to interview him.
Well, shall we hop to our next bourbon?
I'd love that. Yeah.
Awesome. So this one I actually sampled with my parents when I was down at training at Fort Benning. Just over the border, there's a place called Opelika, Alabama. And we were just driving around. They had come down for my graduation weekend, and my parents had never been to a distillery or a tour. And I said, well, then we're going to change that. I'm your son, and this is my life. So we're going to go tour this distillery. And I just Googled around, and I found this place called John Emerald Distilling Company. And it's a small little operation. And we go in there, and it's probably one of the most generous distillery stories I've ever been on. I was slinging bourbon, slinging whiskey, just, hey, you want to try that again? You want to try this? They had some moonshine. They had some schnapps that they made. And he tried I got to try their moonshine, which is their unaged whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no limit. Like, you go to a lot of the bigger players, and it's, well, you get 3 half shots, and that's it.
Right.
This was like, you want to try some more of that? What do you think about that? Because I think that, especially for a local craft distillery, that's going to get you to buy the bottle. Can I have another sip of that? Can I try this next to this whiskey? Can I try that next to the bourbon? And then I'll know if I like that. And he was gung-ho. He actually had a table set up in the front, like with 15 different samples, and then we went to the back, and he had another table set up with more samples. It was great. I wasn't driving, so it was in good spirits. But we figured, why not? We went there, had a good time, and I mean, they have an American whiskey that's pretty much a copy of a Scotch that's aged in port wine barrels that I love, but their cask strength bourbon, which is a double oaked bourbon, which I have for you today, is actually pretty dang good. I have 2 unopened bottles back at my house, just for the sole purpose of having a good high proof cocktail. But also just a sipper. This is a really oaky bourbon. It's double oaked. What they do is they take toasted American oak chips and let that sit and actually float around inside the whiskey in the barrel. So you're actually doubling that char flavor. A lot of that wood sugar comes out when you char the barrel. So when you char the inside of the barrel, it's like a level 2 to 4 char, just depending how charred you want to get. Mm-hmm. But then you add in the toasted chips, and you get even more of that wood note. So it's interesting. It's a different type of bourbon, especially next to the one we just had. So,
amazing. I also want to explain for your listeners, they may hear these like propellers spinning around. Those are guys in powered parachutes just like flying over the airport with nothing else to do with their life. It's truly amazing. One of the really cool things about hanging out here after you go flying is just the different guys that go out and fly in the different ways that everyone experiences aviation here, whether you're a glider pilot, whether you got a powered parachute, or whether you got just a fan tied to your back as you're kind of milling about the airport. It's really cool to see. So a lot of different ways that people kind of take in and enjoy aviation around here.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, hey, this is the ambiance, right? We're in a hangar. Yeah. So there's going to be background noise.
Yeah.
I love it. So cheers, man. Enjoy.
Cheers.
So you'll probably get that a lot more heat on that. I call it heat. It's just a higher cask strength, right? So
yeah.
Cask strength is it just comes out of the barrel as is. A lot of whiskeys are proofed down with water to about 45%. Mm-hmm. I think this one's at about 56%. So I think this is a masterclass on how well a cask strength whiskey can taste.
Yeah.
A lot of higher proof alcohol, for me, actually brings out more of the sugary flavors that are in the alcohol. Mm-hmm. They add a couple drops of water in that really breaks down the molecules and opens and flours the whiskey out. But there are also some out there that are cask strength just to be cask strength and just taste like kerosene.
Right.
But this one is a masterclass on how that is not the case. This is really good cask strength bourbon. Yeah,
so it started off, and it definitely got the initial sort of burn that a bourbon gives, but then it really opens up, like you said. I kind of can taste the sugar, I can taste the oakiness of it, and it's very, very smooth, and it's very, very sweet towards the end.
Yes. Yeah, this is, I would probably say one of the sweeter bourbons I've had, and the cask strength, the fact that it's not too sharp is, I mean, it's pretty impressive to me. So, but yeah, how do you think this stacks up to the previous one?
You know, I got to say I like this one a little bit better,
okay.
Just because to me this is something that I would definitely sit around and just sip on. Probably too. I'd probably go too far with this one, where I'd sit down and then I'd stand up like an hour later and be like, uh-oh.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that there's a lot of cask strength bourbons out there for me too. Cask strength scotches as well. That it's like you don't know that they're cask strength. They're so sweet. A lot of port barrel aged bourbons or scotch that take a lot of that wine note out of the barrel, really sweetens and mellows it out, and it's like, oh, this is 62%. Whoops.
Yeah.
but it's great. So
no, it's delicious.
You told me that you're a bourbon guy. So tell me a little bit about, what's your go-to? How would you describe your palate? How'd you get into whiskey tasting in the first place?
Yeah, to me, whiskey started with some neighbors of mine that were really into bourbon and cigars and stuff like that, and sort of introduced me to all that. And I got to a point in my life where I couldn't drink a 12-pack of beer and have a good time. So I wanted to get there, A, faster, or B, smoother. And so I decided that I was going to go to alcohol to do that. And my preferred choice ended up being bourbon, just because it was a little bit more accessible. And not only that, but there was a little bit more craft involved. I really appreciate sort of the artistry behind different things. And, even when I take a look at some of these airplanes that were sitting around and things like that, to me, especially just looking at my airplane right now, Like someone in probably the 50s came up with this design and they're like, this is going to fly in the air. And if you would have told me that just sitting here, we knew nothing about airplanes today, I'd have been like, you're full of it. Like, that's not going to fly at all. Like, how's that going to fly?
Right.
But it does, and it does really well. And so to me, whiskey is kind of like the aviation of the spirits industry, because there's some artistry, there's some finesse that's involved. To me, it's one of the things that I enjoy the most about it.
Yeah, no, well, that's awesome. I mean, I think I've told you, and you know, I love bourbon. I have bourbon that I will always on my shelf, but bourbon's not my number one. Scotch is, because I like more complex and interesting flavors, and especially the history from Scotland. And a lot of bourbon makers here learn their craft from Scotsmen that came over, over the pond and said, hey, this is how we distill in Scotland. But what's different about bourbon is bourbon has a lot more sweet notes, like corn, and they use a lot less barley. Scotch is much more barley and malt and rye if they can get their hands on it, but mostly barley. And peat moss to smoke which I love peated scotches.
And you know I don't.
I know you don't, which is why I didn't bring it. I almost brought a peated bourbon though.
Oh man,
it's so different.
Yeah, one
day. But anyway, so I just love the complexity of Scotch, and but once in a while I find a bourbon that just makes me go, ooh, this is great. So I don't have bourbon as my number one, but I definitely have, like, the bottles I brought you are some of my favorites that I keep on my shelf at all times.
Sure.
So, but I got into it just because I have friends who like whiskey. They gave me some stuff, and I had been going through this, stomach thing where I like having a craft beer here and there, but after 2 or 3, my stomach is upside down, and I can't do it. I can go through a bottle of, I probably shouldn't say this on the air, but I can go through a bottle of whiskey just fine.
Right. Yeah. To me, it was one of those things where if you finish 2 or 3 beers, like, you just feel like crap, or you get the headache right away. And I wasn't feeling that same way when I was drinking whiskey and bourbon for the first couple times. And
sure.
That's what really kept me coming back to it. And not only that, but selection, right? There were so many options to go and try and do.
Right. Well, and a lot of people don't know this too. When you're during the distilling process, you separate out. They call it cuts. So you're cutting out the heads and the tails, and you're looking for the hearts to make the actual whiskey. Yep. The tails are just the really poor quality alcohol molecules that kind of go into gins and vodkas, and they triple distill those down to make it a little bit better. But your Fleischmann's, your Kesslers, your crappy whiskeys that are on the bottom with a plastic bottle. Price doesn't always mean bad. Bottle doesn't always mean bad. There are, like, Virginia Gentleman is actually a pretty good spirit, but Fleischmann's, for one, that's all tails. So, and there's a lot more sugar in that. Mm-hmm. So if you drink that and you wake up the next morning like you're having a lot of cheap whiskey or cheap brandy, and a cheap brandy Wisconsin Old Fashioned, you're gonna wake up with a headache.
Yep.
And you think, what the hell? I had liquor. Well, you had really shitty liquor. You want the hearts and the heads. You don't want to drink that at all. That is almost pure ethanol, and you're gonna just clean the floor with that stuff. But yeah, it's something that I've learned too. It actually matters, like how far up the shelf you go. You stay on the bottom shelf, you're gonna have a bad day.
I'm probably gonna get disowned by every Wisconsinite listening to this, but once I learned that bourbon was an option in your old fashioned, I never went back.
Oh, so you do a bourbon old fashioned?
Yeah, never do the brandy, never.
I do occasionally for just a nostalgic. I'm gonna have a brandy old fashioned sweet with Corbel in a Wisconsin supper club. I have to.
Well, and I was just gonna say that, like, I feel like it's always Corbel being served with the Wisconsin Old Fashioned. Like, there's just that big. I have it in the picture in my head of the big Corbel bottle. I'm pretty sure I got one at home too, because that's what you do when you live in Wisconsin. But
sure.
But yeah, the big Corbel bottles with brandy. No thanks.
I think I got a really expensive, expensive for Corbel. I got it's a VSOP special edition Corbel. It comes in a little case. Instead of $20, it's $35.
Nice.
I have no idea what's different about it. I haven't opened it yet.
Well, let me know how it goes.
I will.
Yeah.
Are you ready for the next sample?
I am totally ready for the next sample. Let's do it.
So, Baby Blue Corn Whiskey. This is from Balcones in Texas. This is the only non-bourbon we're going to have today. But I did it for a reason. I'm pretty positive this is nearly 100% corn in the mash. So, bourbon gets a lot of its sweetness from corn. Corn's a cheaper grain to get, so you can make a pretty cheap Tennessee or Texas whiskey out of just corn. This is a very distinct flavor of corn sweetness. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you this to kind of show where your palate resides with the corn note before we go into the expensive bourbon that I brought for you to try. This is a pretty special one to me because this is actually the first batch that came out. They have had subsequent batches that have come out. They used to not be available anywhere. Now they're available everywhere. You probably go to Total Wine down the road and get it. But back when I got this bottle, and I've kept it, and a lot of wine and whiskey people know, you get an argon spray to spray inside the bottle that keeps it shelf ready at all times. So it's bottle's a few years old, but now that you can get it anywhere, it's not as special. But it is what it is. But yeah, I just wanted to share this with you. It's a very distinct flavor versus bourbon. So,
All right. Did they just increase production, or kind of how did that occur?
So this is the first Texas whiskey on the market since Prohibition, and I think they had ramped up their distribution a couple of years. Baby Blue wasn't selling as big as their other big name brands, and then they finally got the label is kind of cool. It's Baby Blue. It's a fun little name and whatever, and I think they just decided to start selling it elsewhere. I don't really know. It's probably a marketing thing or...
Well, and there's no doubt that there's corn in it because they got corn on the label.
Yeah. Well, and there's a distinct, too, that this is Texas blue corn.
Okay.
I don't know if that matters for the flavor, but it is what they claim.
It's interesting. It does start out with kind of like that scotchy sort of feel to it, but then it sort of mellows out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like when you nose over it, it smells like scotch.
Yeah.
And then when you get it, it kind of has the best of both worlds a little bit. And I love that there's no peat in it either. So,
yeah, it's wild how the corn really makes it like a rounded, mellow flavor.
Yep.
There's a lot of it's almost buttery. Mm-hmm. It's thick on the teeth. It's a very lasting finish. It doesn't dry your mouth out at all to me. But of course, vanilla, brown sugar is all there. But all that sweetness is from the corn. So that specific part of the bourbon is what bourbon gets its sweetness from, which I think is really interesting. That corn has such a robust, different levels of flavor, and everything you taste in a whiskey is referential. So if you've never had black licorice, you probably wouldn't be able to taste black licorice in a
right.
But so I mean, brown sugar, baking spices, all the traditional notes that are in this. This is just like ramped to 1,000 because it's just strictly corn. Mm-hmm. And I love this one. This is good. Corn whiskey, I think, to me is an underrated part of the market because it's so cheap. You can find places like Heaven Hill makes mellow corn. It has a really disgusting looking bottle and label, and it's on the bottom shelf, and it's $20. Buy it. It's good. It is good corn whiskey. But people don't know that because it looks like it's kind of cheap.
Right.
It's great. Old Granddad. It's a high rye, high corn bourbon. $20. Buy it. It's great bourbon.
Yeah, you had that on the show recently, right?
That's not to say that there aren't also expensive ones that taste great too, but
right.
Price does not always matter.
Well, for those of us with kids and stuff, you can't I would have a hard time like coming home and be like, hey, you know what I did today? Bought a $100 bottle of bourbon. Yeah. So
yeah, ask my wife how that goes.
I can't have an aviation hobby and bring home a $100 bottle of bourbon at the same time.
I feel like I'm required to ask you now, and maybe I can get a sponsorship from Ryan Reynolds. But do you drink aviation gin?
So I have had aviation gin. I like it a lot so every once in a while I'll do a gin and tonic.
Okay.
And I actually really enjoy the Great Lakes Distillery gin. Mm-hmm. I think they make a really nice gin, very clean. So I'm a big fan of that as well. But Aviator gin, of course, like as an aviator, you got to have aviation stuff, right?
Right.
So
right.
Only makes sense.
That's awesome.
Fifth brand.
Yeah. What do you think the future holds for aviation? Is there going to be new advents in exploration? Are we going to be able to get to something where we go even 60,000 more feet in the air and go faster? Is that going to happen?
I think the commercial space stuff is really cool. I mean, you see Branson doing that. You see Elon Musk is working towards that as well on different projects. So I think the way that we experience commercial aviation is going to change. At the general aviation level, I think the airplane that's sitting in front of you right now is still going to be flying 40 years from now.
Sure.
And I think a lot of that is because general aviation has been consumed the same way it's been consumed for the last 80 years, and it's going to continue on the same way. So to me, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of change in the grassroots of aviation, but I do think that the commercial experience will certainly change. I think we're going to see a lot more space. I think we're going to see a lot more, subsonic flight. I think we're going to see a lot of that. And I think you're going to see a lot of electric in airplanes as well.
Sure. Is that I haven't seen any of that. Is that new and coming, or is it just kind of underspoken?
Yeah, right now the world's leading electrical airplane can fly for a total of 20 minutes, which doesn't give you a lot of options. But it's a really cool concept. And to me, I think if you're going to invest in one thing, especially on the aviation side, it's invest in electric aviation, because I think that's going to be the future of general aviation.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I had no idea that was even. I guess. I mean, everyone's going electric now.
Yep.
Wow. Very cool. Well, shall we do our final tasting?
I'd love that. Yeah.
Awesome. So, and we can toast to the Wright brothers, of course.
Yeah, of course.
So, Michter's is a pretty big name in bourbon. They're in Kentucky. They're one of the oldest distilleries in Kentucky, other than Buffalo Trace and Wild Turkey and all them. But Baumberger's is an old distillery back in the late 1800s that was making whiskey and bourbon and all the things, and they folded. Michter's became a big name brand. Had bought them out, bought all the rights to their labeling, their ingredient list, all that stuff, and kind of sat on the name for a while. In, I believe, 2018 was the first release of this bourbon. They re-released Baumberger's, and they do it every year now as a special limited release at a cask strength level. And they just do it with a kind of a big pomp of circumstance of like celebrating our heritage. This is what we come from. This is the bourbon of the old days, and this is so good. I don't know if it's the same recipe. I think they got the same recipe. They probably have changed it a little bit just to play with it, because whatever sells for the market. But they do a special release every year. What I have for you here is a 2021 release. And I got this in Kentucky itself. And one detail that matters most about Baumberger's is that each year of its inception, we have an increased percentage of bourbon that's used in the blend that's aged with I don't even know how to say it, but it's Chinquapin oak.
I'll believe you. Sounds great.
But so it's bourbon traditionally is aged in American oak barrels. The Chinquapin oak apparently adds a much more robust and sugary flavor to the bourbon. So every time they release this Baumberger's, they add more and more of that bourbon that's been touched by that oak rather than American oak solely. So I don't know what the blend is on this one, but it's phenomenal, and it's a very unique series of oak that only one other distillery has admitted to using. It's a trade secret, apparently. Buffalo Trace. And Buffalo Trace is pretty big on the market right now. So this is Baumberger's.
Awesome.
So this is 108 proof.
So it's really got something going for it.
Oh, yeah. So this will kick in your pants.
This will be like us landing on grass and doing slip conversions to slow airspeed, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. This will drop your stomach a little bit.
All right, let's do it.
Cheers,
Cheers.
man. That's different.
It's not as intense as I was anticipating when you were like, tell me the proof.
Yeah.
If anything, it's got, towards the middle and the end, like you can definitely get the sort of the, to me, the kind of the caramel, the vanilla comes at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But it's certainly not as offensive on the front as you would anticipate.
So to me, this tastes a lot more burnt. Burnt wood, burnt tobacco, burnt, what's the caramel, I guess. It's a very like burnt sugar on top of a creme brulee. It's got that kind of a sweet burnt flavor. A lot of tobacco notes on the nose for me. It's very sweet and like berries, which is unique for a bourbon. But I'm guessing that new oak has a different type of flavor profile in the wood sugar that I'm not really sure about, but it works.
Yeah, I can really sense the wood sugar, especially on that second sip. I felt like I got a really sort of big whiff of it as far as taste wise, towards the middle.
Yeah.
Of the second sip, it really comes through. But man, that is really good.
This one too is very, very syrupy. Like you said, coming out of the bottle, it looks syrupy.
Yeah.
It kind of washes your teeth a little bit.
Yep.
Sticks on the tongue for quite a bit.
Yep.
And that burn, for me, rather than a lot of cask strength that burns in the front of your mouth, it burns in the back of your throat. It carries down through the stomach and it kind of warms the soul a little bit. That's the kind of burn I prefer in a bourbon.
Yeah.
So this is probably a masterclass on what I would consider my favorite type of bourbon is this.
Yeah. No, it's really good.
So now you've had 4 different samplings. You might have some recency bias, as I do. Give me a quick ranking.
So, what was our number 2?
The Purveyor's Double Oaked.
Yeah, there was just something about this bourbon, the Purveyor's Double Oak. I felt like was really something special. I felt like it was just between the way it drinks and the flavor profile and the way it comes kind of. I just thought it was really amazing. That was great.
Yeah, it's a good gem.
Yeah. So to me, that'd be my number 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So If we're going down the line.
Yeah.
My number 2 would probably be the Bourbon burgers.
Okay.
Just from how I love the way that it's just nice and smooth, and it gives you a lot of flavor profile in the middle. Leaves you with the kind of the sugary oak feeling at the end. And then the third one here would definitely be the first one we started with, which was that
From Denver.
Yeah, the Bear Creek Distillery.
Yep.
And then not because I don't like it, but the baby blue at the end. Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah,
I would expect that as for a bourbon guy.
Yeah.
But you know why I did that, and why I'm glad I brought it, because it's so unique.
Because you knew you'd be right.
Because I knew. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, as we finish off this last sample, I have to ask the same question I ask all my guests at the very end.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Yeah, so it's so funny because I talked to you about this earlier, and how you had a guest whose name also was Brad, and Brad's response was, "Man, Brad's here! Finally, we can have fun. This is great. Brad made it. We've been watching this whole time." It's a very cliche answer, but I'd want him to kind of affirm that I did everything right, or at least the mistakes that I made, I made atonements for, and that I went forward and did the best I could. And, in the wedding business and in everything else, I feel like there's a high level there's a lot of eyes on what I do, right? And so when you're delivering a ceremony, or when you're kind of going through that, you want to make sure that you're doing right by people. And I've always kind of had that in the back of my head when I'm working with people. My contract is super simple, and it's funny. It mind boggles everybody because they feel like I have this like big, well-established business that's going to have this complicated contract, and it's not. And the reason being is that I'm still surprised people ask me to perform their ceremony all the time. And to me, I always wanted to make sure that I did the best by my kids, I did the best by my wife, I did the best by my business and the people that subscribed to it, the friends that I kept and the people that I had around me. And not only that, but that I hope to inspire not just the people that are around me, but the generation that I leave behind. And that specifically is for my kids, that I raise them right and that they kind of live their life in the same way. And if I could get there and I get the affirmation that we did the best that we could, and that, yeah, we made some mistakes along the way, but you still did everything the way that you were supposed to, that would be the best answer I'd get.
Well, that's a great way to end this. But I want to say thank you so much, and cheers to your part in love, of course, full circle. But also, I'll keep you in mind for my next wedding.
You anticipating that soon? Is that the thing?
No.
Okay, all right.
Anna doesn't listen to my podcast.
I always said that the evolution of the I do business, right? So my practice is I do. We waited till the end of the show to discuss that. That's great.
I should have said something.
The marketing people, and they're like, "Whoa, my God, he screwed that up." But my wedding business, the whole evolution of that, right? My idea for this is that we don't have a strip mall in a really bad side of town. And we'd have the I do business be the first business you walk into, and that would be the business you get married in. And the next business next door would be I did, but I don't anymore. And that would be the divorce attorney. And you could get a 25% discount. Walk through the door. I was previously married by I do. I get a 25% discount on this sort of acquittal of this whole thing. And then next to that, we'd have I did, I don't, but I do again. And then we'd have the whole circle, cycle customers in and out, get more money for less work, and do it by serving people the whole way through. And no, it sounds terrible. It sounds like ambulance chasing lawyering. But you know what? I think it'd be the best business plan ever. Well.
If you need someone to do a podcast with the victims of your, you let me know.
I can't tell if it's a multi-level marketing scheme or not, because I think one business, capitalist strip mall. Oh man, I completely kidding. This is not my vision for the business at all. So those of you listening, that's not my vision for the practice at all. And in fact, one thing that I should mention too is that the business did merge with a company out of Madison called Corey Ceremony. I love being a part of their group, and it gives me access to 5 other officiants who do amazing work in the wedding ceremony space, and gives me access to a lot of that experience, but also to kind of build their business as well. So
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Well, thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure, Brad. I appreciate your friendship and the flight that you gave me before we did the podcast and coming on the podcast. So cheers, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, cheers to you, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it.